I'm Alaz Okudan. Uh, I'm from Turkey. I've been living in Ireland for 2 years now for my PhD research. And I guess it's relevant to start with the educational aspect because it's been a huge part of my life for a long time now. I studied psychology in my undergrad, but then towards the end of it, I realized it wasn't a thing for me. So I decided to do a master's in media and visual studies. So I was working with photography, especially with film photography, for 9 years. Uh, since like 2016, and that kind of personal interest of mine translated into my academic research. So I started to do a master's with a research topic on contemporary use of 19th century photographic techniques. So I was interviewing artists who are working with photographic techniques from almost 200 years ago in the context of Turkey. And kind of it was a turning point for me because I had the chance to kind of combine what I was personally interested in with an academic research of mine. So it became a really good fuel for inspiration. And then I finished that and I stayed in Turkey for another year after my master's, and I taught as a part-time instructor at the university. I taught an undergrad course called Introduction to Art, Design and Culture. It was a good experience as well. And in the meanwhile, I was applying for PhD programs, and through some sort of interesting events, when you find like a good scholarship and a program that kind of fits in your interest, I find myself in Galway doing a research in a program called Creative Technologies. Now I'm working on the topic of visual generative AI and how artists are kind of working with the technology in relation to the concepts of accidents and failures. So it's kind of, in a way, I drifted away from my original research topic of photochemical processes, but I would say photographic theories are still very much tied to what I do right now. And uh, most of the time, I spend time in the darkroom. Uh, I wouldn't say necessarily the topic of psychology itself, but studying psychology was helpful in terms of learning the basics of empirical research, because what is interesting about psychology is it's something I realized when I'm studying it. It's closer to positive sciences than humanities and social sciences of today. So there's a really kind of a rigorous research aspect to it. Everything has to be really kind of uh, measurable and calculable, and you have to be accounted for your kind of decisions in psychology, which kind of taught me to, let's say, conduct a real structured research for the later parts of it. But that's, I would say, is how psychology relates to what I do right now, not the psychological theories or anything. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because, like, let's say, the popular version of generative AI has entered into our lives almost like 3 years ago now. And in that 3 years, discussion has shapeshifted as well, because in the beginning of it, many people are comparing it to the invention of photography 200 years ago, saying that, okay, some people were saying, okay, maybe this is the end of art. Or some people were saying, okay, so people said the same thing for photography, maybe this is the end of art, but maybe something else, this is something that's going to transform the way we do art. But now the discussion seems to be drifted away from that. And it's it's unknown because that comparison kind of shapeshifted and disappeared. Now we can't really compare to the invention of photography 200 years ago because there are a lot of, uh, let's say, variables in play. Especially, I would say, the late capitalistic system is kind of what has taken over technology and making art. I don't know if there is really a place or a ground for us to talk about privacy, because it was a thing of like a topic of maybe 20 years ago. Now it's really difficult, as you mentioned, talk about privacy because it's already out there. And even when we are, let's say, in our most intimate spaces in our homes, there's no sort of privacy because we are kind of connected to those screens, and those screens are always collecting something from us. So I guess if we're talking about privacy, it's not the privacy maybe we were talking about 20 years ago, but maybe a new form of privacy. Maybe it's now about the privacy of thoughts rather than privacy of being. There is some sort of a little hope in me, thinks that it is possible. I can't really imagine, let's say, actual, or like, let's like mass communicated ways of doing it. Maybe it has to be through individual examples, I think, kind of using the technology in our advantage rather than just being subjects to technology. But it's really tough. Then again, I don't think it's an isolated thing, the relation that we have with technology, because it's all part of this economic system that we're all part of, and that economic system kind of treats us as not individuals or humans, but like sources of extraction. I think that structure of being in the world has to change to begin with, so that we're not treated as a source for, let's say, data extraction and feeding more and more into machine operations. So I think we have to change our kind of perspective and how we produce technology itself to begin with, and then maybe it can help us do something different. This is a really difficult, I mean, that's probably the most difficult thing to do when your research is on AI and AI related stuff. You can't really see ahead, right? So like two years ago around these times, I was like working on my research proposal for my application, and the idea was highly influenced by those emerging commercial platforms, text to image generators like Midjourney and Dolly, because they were new and they were exciting, and people were into it without even knowing why they were into it. So it kind of originated from there, and I still see that those kind of understanding of AI kind of dominates the field. When we talk about AI on the streets, people's understanding are either chatbots or large language models or text to image generators that are always created by commercial intention. But my research kind of made me aware that there is a wider possibilities of working with and against AI. So AI doesn't have to be commercial. It can be something you personally create, something you personally collect data, something you personally train. So I guess even though I can't really see the end of my research, my goal is to show that AI doesn't have to be extractive, doesn't have to be oppressive. It can be something subjective that we train, and that is not, let's say, hurtful to other people's privacy or no, I mean, after almost 2 years, I feel at home. I mean, it takes a while, but Galway is, I would say, is an easy city to feel at home, because it's like, obviously physically it's quite a small place, so you get to know the city and the streets and the people quite quickly. But it's also very welcoming, and like people are quite warm and welcoming, so I never had that problem. And coming here as a PhD student also helps, because you already entered this community of other PhD researchers that are mostly international, and they kind of share your problems and stories and understanding. So it was an easy entry for me. Even when I started to work on my research on AI, darkroom was always a big part of my practice, because it was something I was doing before my academic research, and it was something I kept doing while I was doing my master's and, let's say, PhD research. And it has kind of a refreshing aspect to me, because now that I'm working on AI in my research, I have to be, even if I don't, let's say, work with AI, in our everyday lives, we are bombarded by images, and we can't escape that image flow and constant city relation. But when I enter the darkroom, I get to work with just one photograph for a couple hours, and it's such a refreshing feeling to not to be bombarded by, let's say, thousands of images, and just getting to work on a single photograph for several hours is something we don't really have in today's, let's say, society. So it's a nice way for me to yeah, I mean, starting with like darkroom not being used for a while as well, I think that has been the fate of many darkrooms around the world. And I've seen darkrooms in similar cases in Turkey and in other countries as well. Uh, but it's also good to see that now there is a re-emerging interest into darkrooms, because, as I said, there is this need to slow down and kind of not to rush this image making and image sharing process. And yes, we do have a darkroom here at the University of Galway, which kind of shares a similar fate with this darkroom. It has, I think the last time it has been used, because we have the logbook from many years ago, and the last date was like 2013. Somebody did something officially in the darkroom, but now in the last 2 years with the Photography Society, because Photography Society kind of is the responsible body in the university from the darkroom, and now we clean the space up, and now we're trying to open it to the members, and it is somewhat semi-functional right now. And before that, I got the chance to work in several other darkrooms in Turkey in my university darkroom, and similar kind of organizations are also quite active in Turkey, like Artspace, those collective art spaces. So one of those had a darkroom as well. So I was using that before moving here. Whenever I try to think about that, it feels more vague and blurry. It's kind of part of the reason is what's happening in Turkey. The you know the politics and the social life kind of crumbles really quickly, and degradations. It's terrible, I would say. So, but on the other hand, I don't know if I will stay in Ireland, because it's also up to, let's say, another funding or a position that I can secure. And it will something I'll probably, let's say, seriously think on in the next 2 years. But for now, it's all up in the air. It's actually similar to how I find out about many things in Galway is through social media. And I don't know how it works, but I guess the algorithm kind of helps you find something what you're interested in. I mean, I was already looking for ways to work in a darkroom besides the one that we have in the university. And I think it was last summer I saw the call for darkroom members that the art space was looking for, and I was already a bit late, but I sent an application and they were open to accepting me. So it's through social media, very simply.
So yeah,
There's a significant thing about art space is that how supportive, let's say, the administration is, because I am kind of used to hearing the answer no to certain requests and questions, but whenever I kind of contacted, let's say, Kate, especially here, her answer through the board was always, okay, how can we help you? How can we make the darkroom better? And we got to buy kind of like new equipment that the darkroom needed. So I think compared to, let's say, last September, darkroom is much more well equipped now. So in that sense, my experience was really, really good. And because I'm here most of the time in really odd times, mostly in the weekends or the late evenings and the weekdays, so I didn't really get to interact with many other members. But I had the chance to meet another darkroom member, which I saw his show in Outside last year, and Donald Kelly. He was also working here, and I actually enjoyed his work, but I didn't know him personally, and he was a member here as well. So one day, accidentally, we double booked the darkroom, and we got to meet. and it was like a very, I would say, chance encounter. And he's quite knowledgeable about developing films as well. So even that interaction kind of, after 9 years, kind of enhanced my kind of practice in darkroom. So it was it's nice to be part of that community. So. Yeah, I mean, all of these I actually printed during my membership here, and you can see some scenes from Galway and Dublin, and some of them are from older negatives. And I also like to kind of incorporate collage work. So, especially if you look at this one, this is actually two different photographs, and this is like taped onto another one, kind of creates this continuity. And this was in supermarket in Stockholm with the art space booth there. And I've been also experimenting with toning. You can see it's the original black and white print that you get, and you can sepia tone it down. It kind of gives it a different sensation. So I've been working with that, and I am also really interested in like pigeons for some reason, and I like to see them as part of like the cityscape. And this is in Galway, and this is from Germany, and those pigeons are from France. And I think it was last semester I was working with double exposure. You can see here's the cathedral in the background, but the image with the crow is another imposed, superimposed image on that one. So this was an interesting experience. These are double exposed on the film, not on the print. So the film looks like this actually.
And were these all taken on the medium format or no?
The only medium format here is the square
Oh,
on this one.
Yeah.
I actually, do I have more? I don't think I have more medium format with me, maybe here. And these are the contact sheets you get, basically direct sheets from negatives. This is what the 35mm ones look like, and these are the medium format ones. You can see like the negative size is almost 4 times bigger than the 35mm. And these are all the negatives look like. So I try to kind of label what film I used, where was it taken, what year, what time of the year, and which camera, so that I can go back to them easily and when I need to print them.
Yeah.
Well, Here's what my can if you wanna see those. As I said, I am quite interested in like creating photo collages. So these are kind of cut up and put together after they were printed in the darkroom. And these two photographs are actually from a street market in Turkey. And these two, I think I took these photographs in like 7 years ago. And I realized if you go to a market, you see a lot of vendors doing this movement. And it's kind of this two different photographs kind of look like this kind of, let's say, a scene from Bible or something. And these are not from the dark room, but maybe I can show these again. These are digital photographs that I took in Silver Strand Beach. Kind of creating these little focused landscapes in the beach. And I didn't have to shoot them black and white, but since I was working with black and white film for so long now, I got really used to the aesthetics. Now what I mostly do is black and white. Okay. So this is our tiny darkroom, and it's actually it seems quite tiny, but when you start working in the darkrooms, this feels like the ideal kind of space. And okay, maybe it's a good idea to start with the wet side and go to the dry side. So this is what we call the wet side of the darkroom, where you have the sinks and all, because you need quite a lot of water to wash the chemicals and mix the chemicals. These are the developing trays that we have. Have 3 different colors for each chemical down there. So the red goes for the developer, this is for the stop pad, and this is for the fixer. This is kind of another part of the wet side, and on this side we have the enlarger, which is kind of seen as the dry side of the darkroom. And the process when printing in the darkroom starts from here. Basically, put your the film here, and then of course the lights have to be turned off, and then you print it. But until you put them in the chemicals, you don't really get to see what's happening there. And then it has to go through developer, stop pad, and fixer, and then you have a final wash with the waters on the sinks there, and then you get to hang them and see them dry. Of course, this is the printing part, but before coming to the printing part, you have to have your negatives developed, and it also works through these, let's say, containers. We already have a fixed chemical here. This is the fixer, the stop, and the developer. Since this is a shared space, it's a good idea to have a very good labels on the chemicals, because if another person comes after you, they have to know if the chemicals are still fresh or expired, and how many times they have been used, because they get exhausted. So it's when I mix them, I put the dates, and depending on how many photographic papers are developed and how many films I developed, I put like a little signs showing that how many times they have been used, so the next person can know whether to mix up a new one, or these ones are still good to go. I guess. Oh yeah, of course. This is the film developing tank. So we have these spools. Of course, you have to use them in complete darkness. You can even use the red lights that you use in the printing process. And you kind of roll up your film into these spools and put them back into the containers. close them off, and when this cap closes off, it's basically light sealed. So then you add your chemicals one by one, and of course, depending on the film you're using and the exposure you had, you have different developing times, which are uh, already available on the internet. I guess this is one of the best parts of living in the digital age. All those information, depending on what chemical you're using, what film you're using, all those developing times are already available. So it's quite convenient. But sometimes every now and then there comes a new film that the information doesn't exist. You have to kind of experiment and find out what it requires in terms of developing times. Yeah.
Ilford paper that could be.
Oh yeah. We have the papers here. So these are the papers that we can use. I believe this is an old one from the olden days of the darkroom, because I don't think Alpha produces this kind of paper anymore. But this Ilford multi-grade paper is kind of like a multi-purpose, multi-contrast paper that's kind of good for any kind of use. And I mostly work with this paper. And on the outside, I have the paper boxes, but those are basically my already developed and printed photographs, if you want to take a look at those too. And I think it's a good idea to talk about the enlarger a bit. So this is an enlarger called Meopta with a model called Optimus 6. I haven't worked with this kind of an enlarger before moving here. The ones that I work with were called Durst, and they were like color enlargers. But with color enlargers, you can also print black and white. And apparently, Meopta enlargers used to be quite popular when you were into, let's say, printing photographs in your home, and you have this, let's say, an amateur darkroom in your place. So they've sold quite a lot of those I think in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So we have one of those, and we have two of those in our university darkroom as well. So it's kind of, you can see they're all around. And we have two lenses for these. So when I started my membership here, this is its own lens that comes with the enlarger, and this is a 50mm focal length. So with this one, you can only print 35mm films, because if you want to, let's say, try to print with a larger negative, like a medium format, the focal length doesn't work, and the image starts to kind of warp. So we needed a new lens, and I kind of looked into the options and kind of relayed them to Kate, and she bought like a really nice German lens. This is like an 80mm that with this one you can both print 35mm or medium format negatives, and I've been mostly working with this, and it's quite sharp. That's the kind of the deal with German lenses. I guess this is it.
And you were talking about medium format. What type of camera do you use yourself?
So for medium format, I only have one camera. It's a Soviet-made Lubitel 166B. So it's kind of like a knockoff from the German Rolleiflex. That was also like the consumer product in the 80s and 90s. They made a lot of those plastic body cameras, which I accidentally found for like a really cheap in a flea market in Turkey 7 years ago. So for medium format, I've been only using that because buying a second medium format camera is a bit pricey. But for 35mm, I have been actually using several cameras throughout the years. My first camera was another Soviet one, because we have a lot of those in Turkey, actually all around the world, and they're the cheapest kind you can get. It was called Zenit ET, and it was like 2 kilograms maybe. A very heavy camera, but completely mechanical. So even after it was produced like 30 years ago, its light meter was still working because it didn't need any batteries. It was working on selenium and it was still working fine. So I worked with that for a couple years, and then I moved to another camera from Japan called Minolta X700, which I still use. And then I bought another Japanese one called Olympus XA, which is kind of like a compact camera, but you have a lot of control still over the photographs. So I've been mostly using that Olympus or Minolta X700, and I have a couple of just compact point and shoot cameras that I sometimes give out to friends or take it to trips with me. And basically, these are the cameras that